Hi everyone, Sam from Cinch here, and I've got the BMW F30 330e behind me. This, as you might already know, is the saloon car that mates a petrol engine with a hybrid electric system. And it's actually one of the most interesting hybrid saloons you can buy out there because it mixes performance with quite a lot of range and some really comfortable features. Shall we take a closer look, because there's quite a lot to talk about on this car. I'm sure you're familiar with the design. The F30's been out for a few years and it's already been succeeded, but thanks to the way German designers have been in the past few years, these designs evolve rather than become drastically different, so still looks pretty fresh, doesn't it? 250 horsepower, rear-wheel drive. Interestingly, you have a petrol engine under the bonnet, a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder, and that's got an electric system at the back with a boot being the place where the battery's held to then give you a combined output of about 250 horsepower. It does 0 to 62 in 5.9 seconds. I mean, that's quicker than most hot hatches, and it's up there with some of the back-end sports cars, certainly sports cars from 10, 15 years ago. So you've got loads of performance, discreet looks, and hybrid efficiency. 50 miles per gallon you'll get out of this on a run, so it's really impressive. And I mean, to talk you through the specs of the car, you've got a battery located in here at the bottom, and it can be charged even on a 3-pin domestic plug. So that's like the normal plug you have in a house where you plug in your hairdryer or whatever you want to charge, not one of your special electric car chargers. It will charge that up in about 5 hours. If you have a slightly more powerful charger, like a specific car charger, it's closer to 3 hours. So this is a really quick top up, gets you roughly 20 miles of range. And of course, you'll have that combined performance if you leave it in hybrid, to have like an actually very sporty car. We've been driving it around and we're in Scotland at the moment. I don't know if you can tell why I'm so cold. And it's got some real power and brilliant amounts of torque. So you put your foot down and you have that zip of electric energy before the petrol engine then picks up and gives you a more familiar thrust and a bit more of a conventional push in the back. And in here, if you look, you've got your charging cables here, and that's your plug port there, and you do your charging hopefully either at home or maybe you give it a top up when you're at a service station or something like that. But then on the other side, just to bring you back around here, I have to press a button in here. This has caught me out a few times at the petrol station, but press that little button in there and there's your fuel filler cap, like a normal petrol car. But obviously, if you want to achieve your best miles per gallon, you know, that 50 miles per gallon on the motorway, and you know, something closer to the high 30s in town, which is really impressive, by the way, for you know, a fairly kitted out saloon car, then obviously you need to have a bit of battery charge. Now the interesting thing is, obviously you can run around in electric mode, allow it to run flat, but if you join me in the car here, you'll see on the transmission tunnel where the automatic gear selector is, we have a few buttons. So we have an e-drive button down here, which is, I mean, the name kind of gives it away. It's your electric drive button, but it doesn't just control when the car's in all electric mode. It can get you into that mode, which gives you about 20 miles of range of all electric power. But it can also switch through to allow the car to drive in its more conventional hybrid way. So the car engine and the battery pack with the motor are working harmoniously and kind of in the background, and you just drive as normal. Or you can switch it into a save mode. And in that save mode, the engine works extra hard to get power back into the battery, and ensure that even though you're driving and using electric energy, you're still maintaining the same level of charge. So if you enter a city, for example, you'll still have battery to turn it into electric mode and turn your petrol engine off. Beside that, we have more buttons. We have a Sport and Eco Pro button. They actually cycle through a menu with more modes in between them and ahead of them. So you've got Sport, but then you also have a Sport Plus, where it really sharpens up the performance. And then you can cycle back down to normal or Eco Pro, where the car then is put into its most efficient mode. Everything is sort of softened off a little bit as far as your controls are concerned for the accelerator, just so that you are encouraged to drive in a more efficient manner. And ahead of them, we have an electronic stability control systems off button. All that does is turns off the systems that would otherwise stop you from having wheel spin or stop you from making the car slide about. So it means you're on your own. You've got 250 horses to control with your right foot and your steering inputs all on your own. But that is a signal that BMW is able to say, you know, this car's out for having some fun as well as being efficient. And talking about that, this particular model is spec'd with the M Sport suspensions. It means the car rides a tiny bit firmer over things like speed bumps or in the city, but it's a really small amount. It's very comfortable generally speaking, but it also means that the car is slightly sharper and slightly more athletic out on the country roads. So it's just a bit more fun really. And with that M Sport package, you get other nice features. You might have noticed that this leather wrapped steering wheel has a little M badge down here. It looks the part. You know, some manufacturers go overboard with trying to give you flat bottoms and everything. Sometimes a simple leather wrap steering wheel with the right badges on them are the best. And obviously you have leather over your touch points here, and of course leather seats. And the thing I like about them the most is that they have a little button down here and I can press tighter or wider, and what that does is opens or closes with electric motors these lumbar supports here. So for the narrower driver, you can tighten up the seat and make it squeeze you. For the wider driver, you can open it up and give yourself a bit more space. But ultimately it means any driver of any width or any shape can get in here and find the most comfortable position that they want to find, and then obviously feel snug in the car as well. A snug seat typically makes you feel like you're in a sportier car. Again, adds to that M Sport feel and really adds to the wide range of talents this car has. Now, of course, with this being the 3 Series rather than its sibling, the 4 Series, there's a bit of focus on the back as well because this has back doors. 4 Series is obviously just the front doors. So if you come around to the back, you'll see, firstly, it's very easy for me to get in. I have my own door. And secondly, there's good space. Because it doesn't have the swept-back roofline like the 4 Series, you have a bit more headroom. So I've got quite a bit of space here. I'm above average in height and I'm totally fine for space. Decent leg room. Comfortable seats with this leather package that we have here. Middle seat is admittedly a little bit narrow, but this primarily is a 4-seater car with the 5th seat being there for slightly shorter journeys or maybe kids. And you do get your own little vents down here and handily a little charging point here if you have something that will fit with those 12-volt plugs. So it's pretty good given that otherwise, you know, this is a few years old now in design. You still get all the things you would need. It makes you think actually that the latest cars that have come out, even though they offer even more, sometimes this is just enough, isn't it? Let's look in the boot as well because it's pretty generous space in there as well. Now you can open the boot with a button under here, but it's more fun, I think, to do this. It's not electric, but it's got a spring, so it just pops open when you release it. And you can see here, we've tidied the cables away. The cables for charging live here. Some cars, the cables just have to go in a bag that's just scattered here, but actually BMW thought a bit more about that and I've given you a space down there. You've got some storage space here and a really deep boot down here. So obviously you've got plenty of space, even for suitcases. We actually had 3 suitcases stacked upright earlier on today. So they were stacked upright like that. And then we had loads of other bags around it as well. So it's a really generous space, definitely enough in there for the weekly shop as well, even if you have a sizable family. So it's a pretty generous package overall, very practical indeed. So let's see how this car handles out on the road, because obviously practicality and efficiency is one thing, but it's a BMW and an M Sport one at that. So it should handle nicely as well. Out on the road in this 330e, things initially feel very relaxed because you have, initially when you start, just electric power. Now we're rolling, both petrol engine and electric motor are working in tandem. The electric motor can handle speeds up to 50 miles per hour. We are rolling around in normal hybrid mode, but the car does feel just a bit effortless. There's a really nice quick response to the accelerator pedal because the electric motor does all the work initially and the petrol engine then can feed in seamlessly after that. You can actually do, if you have the car with its battery charged up fully, about 148 miles per gallon in this car, but realistically, as I mentioned earlier, it's about 50 to the gallon you can expect in a more normal real-world driving scenario when both petrol and electric are being used. But what's key about this exact car that we're driving today, and I think is potentially one of the most exciting things about it, is that it is an M Sport suspension model. So it feels a bit tighter, it feels that much more responsive. The steering is light and effortless, but there's some good feel once you get some weight through in the corners. And actually, you'll see as I'm at this red traffic lights now, the sportiness of the suspension I think goes really well with how quick this car accelerates off the line. It feels kind of like an electric car because of that electric motor, but then you get the more familiar delivery of a petrol engine. So when these lights go green, I'll be able to show you just how that feels, and hopefully you'll be able to hear how it sounds, because that 4-cylinder engine, let's give it a go now, electric only, and then the petrol engine kicks in seamlessly. And we're straight up, there we are, to 40 miles an hour straight away. So it's really quick and really effortless. You could beat most cars away from the lights if, for example, you needed to get to another set of lights and you wanted to get across into another lane. You could do that very safely, no problem. And actually out on the country as well, the car feels effortless enough that you can actually start to enjoy the gearbox. It's got an 8-speed automatic gearbox, but if you click it across and move that paddle to the left, you can then bring these paddles into place. So on your right you have up, so if I were to click that, we go up a gear, and if I click the left one, we go down a gear. So obviously that means you have a semi-automatic feeling behind the wheel, which again goes with that sporty, enjoyable characteristic that you get with an M Sport model. But ultimately, this car wants to be efficient and it wants to be calming, and it does those things so well. So some of that performance that you have provided by the hybrid system actually goes really well with the handling of the car. It handles really sharply, and of course, because you've got good weight distribution and because this is a medium-sized car, it's a really confidence-inspiring machine to drive. You can take it out on wet roads. We're here in a very cold and a slightly damp Scotland, which is close to Aberdeen, and it's a tricky scenario for a car with a lot of power going only to the rear wheels. Yet this thing all day has shown so much confidence and has made me feel really, really happy to put my foot down out of corners and to just enjoy the performance of the car in a safe and totally controlled way. And I really, really like the way that they've tuned the delivery of the power, because it feels so seamless. I mean, you know, this technology is getting better and better with years going by, but even on a car, you know, this particular model, it came out a few years ago now, it just feels so seamless, and so there's no cut point between electric and petrol power. And the best thing about this car not being brand new actually, of course, means you can pick these up now for under £20,000. There are cars, 330es on Cinch, for just over £17,000. I mean, that's tremendous value for money. And of course, if you charge them up correctly, you're going to get well over 100 miles per gallon. And if you need to drive in electric mode, you can do that. So it has all of these broad and very, very useful features. And yet it's pretty affordable to buy. It's hard not to be a big fan of the BMW 330e. Most people say all the car you need is a BMW 320d, and while that may still be true, the 330e in today's ever-changing world now feels like the car that's right for the moment. Even though there are some tremendous electric cars out there, if you're not quite ready to make that full jump just yet, I think the 330e is where it's at. Under £20,000, you really can't complain with that.